Welcome to Uncommonly More with Stacey Harris. I am Stacey. I'm the host of this show and the CEO of podcast production agency Uncommonly More. My team and I work with podcasters just like you to shift shows from frustrating time sucks to productive members of sales teams with professional, strategic podcast production. You know what? I think that's enough. Let's get into the show and we'll talk more there. Welcome to episode 535 of this podcast. I have a really special announcement today, so I'm not going to do any of the preamble-y stuff about how exciting this is, because it just is, and so I want to get into it. I'm super stoked to announce something that has been on my mind for quite a while, and I couldn't figure out what it looked like totally until really recently. And it was funny once I sort of got my brain around what I wanted it to look like. It all came together really quickly, which is a story for another day, but I'm super stoked. We are launching a brand new podcast in addition to this show. So a second podcast. Here's the deal though. This podcast is going to be private, meaning to subscribe to this podcast, you need to go opt in and be a part of our email communications to get access to this feed. The reason for that is because this second podcast is going to be a little less frequent. We're only going to be releasing episodes once a month, but there will also be sort of some first stop stuff that happens there. This show, of course, is strategically put together, and there's rhymes and reasons for why we talk about certain things when we talk about things. We repurpose a lot of things here, and this show will continue to be that, and it'll continue to be this resource that it has always been. But this new show, which, by the way, is titled the podcast Newsroom, is a little different. It's going to be news. So once a month, we will be talking about what you need to know that month to get better, more profitable results from your podcast. This will be like an action list of what you should be doing to get results, but also what you need to be aware of. And I'm going to do a little preview in today's episode, and I'll share that in just a second. But that's what this episode is built to be. In addition to that, though, as there is something that you need to know now, I'm going to share it. So occasionally I'll be dropping 3-minute, 5-minute, and 10-minute episodes where I'm just jumping in to tell you something you need to know. And again, that's what we're going to do an example of today. I am stoked for this show because it will be the first place I share news and updates. It will be shared there, and that link will go out to the email list, and that's how you'll know about it. The cool thing is you can still listen to it wherever you want. And if it gets missed in an email, you'll see it in your podcast feed. All you have to do to make sure that you get access to this private podcast is to go to uncommonlymore.com/newsroom. Again, this is a completely private feed, so you're not going to be able to get it by just searching in your favorite podcast provider. You will need to sign up first. Once you sign up, you will be emailed access to the show. Now, even better, occasionally, and we don't have it so far, but occasionally in future episodes, we have actually something planned for September's episode. There's going to be additional content, like in the way of workbooks, worksheets, things like that. And so you'll also get access to a private training library where whenever there is an episode that goes out with additional content, that's where you'll find that. Videos, PDFs, links, things like that will be in that space. And again, as those things are available for episodes, you'll get an email with the links to whatever it is that you need to access. So all of that is going to be set up. Basically, I'll be using the secondary podcast as a much more training and resource library kind of tool. And you'll only be able to get access to it by being on the Uncommonly More list. So you will get out weekly updates with episodes of this show as well. When we have things going on Uncommonly More, you'll get those updates as well. It's really the best way to stay connected to what's happening around here anyways, but access to that private podcast is definitely going to be worth getting in on, if nothing else. All right. So head over to Ready? Are you ready? uncommonlymore.com/newsroom. Spoiler alert, if you go to the show notes of this episode in whatever podcast player you're listening to this, there is a link to that there as well. But also you can remember uncommonlymore.com/newsroom. I believe in you. I believe. All right. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to talk about on this show. Let's give you a little example of what's in the August episode of the show. How's that sound? What I want to talk about as we kick off August is this. This is literally a conversation I've had with, at this point, I think every single client of ours in the last couple of weeks. Apple has announced, oh, I know, it makes me nervous too. Apple has announced that there is some issue happening on the back end with Apple downloads, or with download reporting on Apple Podcasts. When you have somebody subscribed to your podcast, or what they're calling automatic downloads set up, then there's an issue where it's downloading on the listener side. So you're subscribed to the Uncommonly More show. It got downloaded on your side. No problem. Here's where there's a hiccup though. It may not have shown up on my side in my stats sort of report area in my podcast hosts. On our show, we use Libsyn, but whatever that may be, Anchor, it doesn't matter. The host is irrelevant because it's actually on the Apple side where this error is happening. Now, you may have seen some podcasters talking about how you need to go and unsubscribe and resubscribe, or that it may be causing an issue with actually getting your downloads. I've not actually seen that to be true anywhere. What I have seen is that it's just not reporting on the back end, which is, again, what Apple reported in their press release about this. They also said there would be a fix. Now, they didn't say when it was coming. So we'll see it, but I don't know when. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks. Honestly, between you and me and the speaker box, the new Apple Podcast player is not my favorite. As a consumer, I'm finding myself ending up more and more on Spotify. I'd love to hear where you're listening to podcasts these days. But the reason I bring that up is because what I want to make super, super clear here is it's absolutely critical that we're putting our show as many places as possible. Because, yes, we need to know about this Apple Podcast download issue because you're likely seeing it impact your download numbers. I know for us, we have a huge part of our listenership that is Apple Podcast players. And so, yeah, we're seeing a dip. We're seeing a dip across several of our clients because that's very much where they're getting their podcast from. I have other clients who don't actually have a large listenership on Apple Podcasts. Their listenership is larger on Spotify or Amazon or whatever. And they're not seeing as big of a hit. But again, it comes down to, are we in as many places as we can be? So A, it's easy for clients to ask us, but also if clients are having a poor relationship with a podcast player, regardless of the fact that it's the most popular amongst your listeners, you may see that change. And so oftentimes I see podcasters go, well, everybody's just listening on Apple Podcasts. That's the only people who I'm going to go through the step of making sure that show is out. Or I'm not going to necessarily worry about the email I got from my host saying that there was a new distribution point I could take advantage of, because all of my listeners are coming from Apple Podcasts anyways. Well, what I'm very curious to see is with this and several other hiccups that we've seen with the Apple Podcast player, we see more and more people going to Spotify or Pandora or Amazon or Overcast or Podcast Addict or whatever they end up on. We want to make sure we're in as many places as possible so that we can make sure that we are available wherever those listeners might want to find us. All right? That's the kind of stuff we're going to be covering over on the podcast newsroom. It is the news you need to know to have a more profitable podcast. If you join us today, you will hear the August episode. So it'll almost be like you got a bonus episode of me. You're welcome. So head on over to, once again, ready, uncommonlymore.com/newsroom. You said it with me that time, didn't you? I know you did. And make sure you are subscribed to the new podcast, the podcast Newsroom. It will not impact this show. This show will still be the kind of show it's been. This show will continue to talk about the things that we've been talking about. Occasionally, we may take the conversation further on that show. Those episodes may end up being a bit longer, sort of depending on the month and what we've got to talk about. But for right now, nothing changes with this show. Next week, you will hear another fantastic sort of best of episode. We're going to be talking about guests. The week after that, you'll be back with a new episode. And we're going to talk about falling in love with your show again, because as summer ends and school once again begins, for some of us in person even, we'll see. No, for us, it is happening in person, but I don't know if it is for everybody. As we see those things happening, it might be time for us to be like, oh, hey, can my show not suck? I know for me, the summer is always the hardest time to get shows out, which is one of the reasons you're hearing some best of episodes this summer. We talked about that a few weeks ago. Anyway, so that's what's coming up over the rest of August. And again, if you head over to the new podcast Newsroom show, you can grab that August episode now. So I will see you over there, and I will see you back here next week. I hope you have a fantastic week, a fantastic start to your August, and I'll talk to you soon. If you made it to this point of the show and you still happen to be listening, which statistically is unlikely, I want to say thank you for listening. Thanks for hanging out with me today, and I want to hear from you. So reach out on social or via email and let me know what actions you're going to take from today's episode, because honestly, that's why we produce this show. That's why I record this show. That's why my team does all the work to release this show, is so that we can help you. You can help make a difference in your show and consequently in your business. If you haven't left a review for the show, head over to ratethispod.com/more. It's an easy way to show some love to the show and also help us reach more podcasters who are looking for the same kind of support you were looking for. If you have any suggestions or ideas or thoughts you would like me to address on the show, be sure to reach out. Again, like I say a lot, this is the start of the conversation, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say.